Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to another ECLA Online Learning Center session. My name is Martin. I am the Legal Project Manager at ECLA based in Brussels. And today we are delighted to continue the discussion with Knowliah about KPIs. And they will provide an expert insight into 10 steps that can be used as guidance. Please note that questions can be asked in the bottom right corner. And there are some files that can be downloaded from the bottom right corner that can be used during the session as well. And Sien will elaborate further on that. Sien?
Thank you very much, Martin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome at today's webinar, the Free Starter Kit for Legal KPIs. First of all, I'm very happy to see that we have today participants again from all over the world. So welcome everyone from which country you're even dialing in and at which time zone. We're very happy that you're all here. So as Martin mentioned before, this webinar is a little follow-up on our previous webinar where we've discussed KPIs for legal departments more in depth. We've talked about how you can define KPIs and how you can achieve them. If you missed out this webinar, it's not a problem at all because you can go to our website, knowliah.com, also on the ECLA website. The recording will be available. You click on Learn on the Knowliah website, you select the webinar, and then you can make the choice to rewatch our previous webinar. But today's session is also a very practical one and easy to follow, so don't panic if you missed out our last webinar. And what is exactly the objective of today's webinar is to offer you a more practical exercise to guide you towards installing KPIs for your legal department. And to make it as easy as possible, we've made for you like a little work material. It's a PDF file. You can download it in the box below on your screen. There's files download and you see Free Starter Kit for Legal KPIs. And I've also put the file into the chat box. So I give you some time to download it. I see that already 11 people. Yeah, okay, more than 10 people. The downloads are increasing. Perfect. So I see that you all found it there in the box below. So take these notes with you, take these scoring tables with you, because it will be very useful when our experts are explaining things that you can immediately start filling it in for your legal department and learn even better from that. So here we are again with our two digital legal experts, Hans van Hegen and Yves Lefer. For the people who don't know them yet, please, gentlemen, quickly introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Sien. My name is Hans van Hegen. I'm the founder and CEO of the company. I'm not a legal person, although I'm an engineer, but all over 30 years or more, I'm interfacing with legal people, in-house counsels, as well as law firms. So not only experienced in AI, NLP, and software development, product development, but also in the legal subject.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. My name is Yves Lefer. I'm commercially responsible within Knowliah and digital legal expert for over almost a decade. Very excited to be here again, seeing a lot of people in a lot of countries, all within the legal industry. So I think we have a very practical webinar here where we will assist you and help you in KPI definition, monitoring, and tracking as a follow-up, as Sien mentioned, of the previous webinars, which are, of course, available on our website and the ECLA website when it comes to KPI management.
Thank you all. Yves, you've mentioned that you've worked for Knowliah as well, the same for Hans, but for people who don't know the company yet, can you please give a brief explanation about what you guys do?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sien. So Knowliah is a Belgian company with active users across the world. We have been in the market for over more than 22 years since a couple of days, where we offer the most complete and intelligent enterprise legal management platform to the market. So that means that we work together with small, medium, and large-size legal departments, but also their stakeholders. So our tool is no longer a silo tool. It is really a collaboration platform for the entire organization when it comes to enterprise legal management. And of course, KPI tracking across the organization to support the organization in its overall objectives is a key functionality, a key benefit of such a tool.
Thank you very much, Yves. I've noticed that not everyone has already downloaded the working file. So these last couple of people, please don't forget to do it, because we're going to start in a couple of minutes with the exercise. But first of all, a very important question, and our experts are also very curious to hear your answers. How urgent is implementing KPIs for your legal team? I'm going to start the poll in a couple of seconds. So please let us know how high the urgency is to implement KPIs into your legal department these days. So I've started the poll. So please don't forget to download the work file and also to answer the poll. I see all the answers coming in. The opinions are very divided. Okay, within 10 seconds, I will close the poll. The last answers are coming in. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and normally you can see the results right now. Yeah, the biggest answer is that implementing KPIs for your legal team for most of the people is not really urgent at all, with an implementation time within 12 months. Experts, what are your thoughts about the results of this poll?
No particular opinion. It all depends on the people who are in the webinar, of course. Mm-hmm. But if it's really urgent to be implemented within 3 months, that's a sticky time frame.
Okay. Yves, do you have any comments? Oh, we don't hear Yves anymore. Yves is talking, but yeah,
sorry,
there you are.
I was on mute.
He's back.
So, no, I agree, of course, what Hans says. Within 3 months, KPI tracking, there are possibilities, but it's slightly challenging. There's some preparation to do, so we'll go into detail right away in the webinar. Slightly surprising that it's not as urgent as previous webinars that we and research that we did with the market, with customers and companies in its whole on a global level, where we see and receive the feedback that KPI tracking becomes a real priority to be able to drive the organization and support it in its objectives. So excited to explain how you guys can start with this as soon as possible in a practical and transparent way, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, the audience, for answering the poll, and of course the experts to give a little feedback on the results as well. So now, Hans, the stage is yours. You're going to learn us 10 easy steps to install KPIs in your legal department. Quickly reminder for the audience, download the file so it will be very easy for you to follow during this webinar. Hans, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sien. So we divided the exercise into 10 easy steps. Not a large paper or a large method to implement KPIs in your legal department. If you will follow with the exercise this coming 50 minutes, you will have basically your exercise done on preparing the preparation on installing KPIs in your legal department. And we have a number of easy steps. First is about determining legal domains. linking objectives to those legal domains. Do a review if your objectives are smart. There are a number of pitfalls, as we discussed last time. Avoid those pitfalls, meaning probably that you need to delete some objectives. Not all the objectives are measurable, so how will you measure them is an item in the discussion. You have your targets. Are they realistic? What do you achieve today? How will you present the results? To who? How? How will you communicate the KPI initiative in your organization? And how will you learn from your KPI results in improving your legal team? And then you can take off and implement KPIs in your organization. If we start with the first one, last time we already listed a number of legal domains. Now, this is not written in stone. You can add others. So the first exercise is about pick at least 5 or a maximum of 5. It can also be 4. Use the language you use in your organization. Probably internal efficiency can be called something else. Corporate housekeeping can be entity management or another term. So translate them in your internal language, in the words that you use today. Add missing domains. This is not a complete list. You can add other ones, but limit yourself to a top 5. Did you apply that?
Yes. So the purpose during this webinar is that we actually do this exercise together with you. So that's why the document that Sien mentioned that is under the below of your screen that you can download, that you can actually do this the exercise at the same time, and of course you can do it afterwards as well, and always contact us if necessary to be assisted in the practical exercise. Now, the purpose is that we do this now. So we did it as well. So we looked at the different legal domains, and we selected the top 5 within the context of our exercise, which seemed to be the most relevant ones to start tracking KPIs in. And the 5 ones that are mentioned here are the internal efficiency, the service levels to the business, the success degrees on litigation, risk mitigation, and compliance to regulations. So these are the top 5 domains that we selected. Now it's the purpose then to also go and have a look on the objectives that you can define in those different domains. Maybe Hans, you elaborate on this one.
Yeah. So you selected your maximum 5 domains, legal domains where your team is active in. And for each of those objectives, you should list 2 to 5 objectives for each of your legal domains that you are active in. Again, rename them, apply, use them as you want. Now, within the exercise booklet, you have a number of examples. So for each of those different domains, we listed potential objectives as a kind of inspiration for you. If you easily come up with other objectives, that's fine. That's meaning that they are top of mind for you, that they are important for your organization. Again, the examples is not a fixed list. You can add them, you can translate them, but they are there just to inspire you, to help you facilitating this exercise. Did you come up with some results in this regard? I'm showing the examples.
We cannot hear you anymore. Yeah, in the meantime, we show the examples. They're also mentioned in the work file you've received. Okay, and we see Yves' exercise, but we cannot hear him.
think you have an issue with your headset, probably.
Yes, we'll go back to the last examples of objectives. We can show them in the meantime to the audience as well, so that they can make the exercise. If you have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to ask the experts. You can put your questions into the chat box and we'll answer them as soon as possible.
Otherwise, I will comment the exercise.
Yes, that's also a good idea.
While Eve is struggling with...
Yes, okay.
So,
Okay, are you guys hearing me now?
Yes, Eve.
Okay.
Eve. Here
Just
we go again.
Just in time. Perfect. So sorry for that. I don't know what happened. So as Hans mentioned, there are some examples listed here of objectives that you could take into account. Of course, these are some examples based on our experience with our corporate legal departments across the globe in different types of industries. But of course, they can differ following your organization and your industry. Now, doing the exercise, with the 5 legal domains that we picked out earlier, listed here, we selected some objectives that we have in our organization, making sure that we can improve the overall organization of the legal department and supporting the organization. And for the internal efficiency, it comes down to reducing the legal spend. External legal spend, internal legal spend, to improve the legal department's productivity. And we'll go into detail right away, and to reduce the overall elapsed time of matters. And a matter can be a contractual matter, it can be a litigation, it can be an advice, it can be a project, so it can take different forms. Then for the service levels to the business, we selected 3 objectives to improve the department proactivity. That's something that we really see evolving into the market in different organizations, is that the legal department is switching from a proactive department rather than a reactive department. And we do have some very precise metrics that you can follow up to measure it and also to prove it and to communicate it. Another one is to reduce the elapsed time on creating contracts. Contract management, contract lifecycle management is a very hot topic. What it is all about, how can we improve it, how can we make it more efficient, how we can reduce risks. We do have our next webinar, which is very specifically on contract lifecycle management, so don't miss that either. The third one in the service levels to the business is to reduce the elapsed time on legal advice. As a legal department, you are at service of your internal customers, and you want to improve that service. And if you want to give advice, it's to support the organization, also to reduce litigation. So the better, the more, the quicker advice that you can give, the more qualitative advice that you can give, the more that you can support your organization. Success on litigation means that we reduce the external legal spend, reduce elapsed time, and increase percentage of your pre-justice closures. These are very specific objectives that you can define to have KPIs within the domain of success of litigation. Risk mitigation, extremely important. Also C-level objectives. There we define some objectives for the legal department which support the entire organization, is to reduce the risk within contracts, which is of course linked to contract management, reduce the privacy risks on a local but also on a global level, reduce the number of damages and fines, of course from a cost and a financial perspective. And then final legal domain in which we defined objectives as a compliance to regulations is to reduce the number of investigations. These are necessary, but they take a lot of time and cost a lot of money. So it's to reduce the number of them. But of course, if necessary, you need to do them. Increase awareness with the business colleagues so that you have to do less investigations and that there are less fines. So reduce the number of citations and fines from regulatory agencies. Of course, that is only possible if your business is better aware, better knowledgeable about legal affairs and legal knowledge.
Thank you, Yves. Now, maybe to make a comment on the number of objectives. We started with 5 domains, and for each of domain, 3 to 5 objectives. So if you have the maximum of 25, that's a lot. But in the next steps, we will filter out those that are not smart, that are a certain risk, and so on. So we will end up with less. And on average, if you start over here with 25, you will have less than 10 at the end. So if you have over here 15 as Yves has, you will end up at the end somewhere between 5 to 10. And if you have even less, it might that you only have at the end 3 to 5 measurable KPIs. That's not an issue, that's not a problem. Just be aware that the more elaborated your list at this moment, the more KPIs you will have at the end. If your purpose is only to have 3 at the end, KPIs at the end, it's more than sufficient to have, for example, over here, 10 to 12 or even 15. At the end, you will have those KPIs that are most relevant, dominant for your organization. So the next step is filter out in those objectives the things that are not smart, that are not specific enough, that are very hard to measure, that are difficult to achieve, to realize. Maybe they are not relevant for the organization because you have your objectives within legal team, but you're working in an organization and the organization has also his objectives. So also have a look, a match between your team objectives towards the overall objectives of the organization. And then T is for time. It needs to be timely phased in a period, in an evolution, and so on. So for applying this, we have on the next slide a form where you take your current objectives, you fill in the scores for each of the 5 elements of SMART, and at the end you only keep your top 15 or top 10 or top 5, whatever you want to achieve at the end. So the form you can find in your work material, and if you did already a pre-fill.
Yes, thank you, Hans. So what you see here are the domains that we selected, the legal domains, 5 legal domains that were chosen. The objectives that we just communicated that seem in our organization relevant to the organization, and then the SMART exercise. This is textbook SMART, but it's often forgotten and it's easy to do. So it's just picking those objectives, listing them, seeing if the objectives are really specific, if it's understandable, there's a definition that is clear to everyone, that is consistent. Is it measurable? Can you actually measure it? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? And relevant is mainly, does it make any sense to track it? And is it supporting the overall objectives and targets of the organization in its whole? Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to track it. And is it time specific? Can you put a time on it? So just give it a score between 0 and 5, 5 being actually applicable, and then you will have a total of a total score for each of those objectives. And then it's very easy, of course, to select a couple of them which have the highest scores to further build on them.
Okay.
And as you can see here, the one that hits the highest score is to reduce external legal spend. Is it a surprise? No, it's probably one of the main KPIs that needs to be tracked, but amongst others, of course. So let's further deep dive in the exercise.
Thank you, Yves. Now, the next step is about the pitfalls. Now, the pitfalls exercise, you can apply it at this moment on the objectives, but you can also postpone it with one step, because the next step is about translating your objectives into measurable things, measurable elements. And your pitfalls can be applied as well on your objectives as on the measurables. So over here, we applied it on the objectives. Remember of the last webinar where we explained those pitfalls, having too many, but the exercise is basically about avoiding too many, having unclear definitions and understanding of what is meant, very expensive or difficult to track in the organization, perverse incentives, not wanted reactions of people, other unintended consequences in the organization, or a shift in the objectives. You can have a review against those pitfalls, and basically, again, we prepared a table for you where you can add a maximum of 15 of your previous exercise. It can be less, as explained. So what was your result of your exercise in this step?
Yes. So from the previous exercise where we made a scoring of the smartness of the selected objectives, the most relevant ones or the highest scores were picked out and are listed here. And now we're going to apply a similar exercise, but based on what Hans just explained, the pitfalls scoring, meaning that we're going to define how those objectives score against the clearness of the definition, the difficulty to track it, or the costs that is related to track it. Is it actually an incentive? Is it the right incentive? Doesn't tracking the KPI, doesn't it imply that you create perverse effects, because you can be focused on tracking a certain KPI which seems relevant, but which by focusing on it can create perverse effects. Reducing costs in general is a good example. If you only focus on reducing costs and that the only thing that you do, and in the end you have a very low cost, but you don't have any quality, any service level anymore, it doesn't make any sense, so you create perverse effects. And a shift in effectiveness. By focusing on specific certain objectives and KPIs, you can shift the focus that is necessary to maintain your strategy and your business strategy to support your organization. So this exercise has been done here, again resulting in top scores for certain objectives. These ones are then selected, and you can of course be flexible in that to choose the highest one, but you don't have to say I only choose 3. You can obviously say I choose 3 through 4 to 5, depending on the organization, the size of organization, the industry that you're in at, etc. Let's move on to the next step, Hans.
Just a small remark, be cautious about the scoring, because over here is the inverse of the previous SMART exercise. Over here, the 5 is no risk at all, and 0 is a high potential risk. It's control logic compared to the previous one. Now, the next step is to translate those objectives into measurable approaches, measurements. To do so, again, we listed a lot of examples just to inspire you, but you feel free to define your own measurements. But from experience, for legal people, we see this as the most difficult step. A general objective that it's translated into something measurable. It's more for IT and engineers, so I'm happy with that. But I can imagine, and we see it in the market, this is a difficult step. So not all objectives can be measured with only one figure, with one number. So the exercise is about think with an open mind and try to define for each objective 3 potential measurements. And in a second step, review them again and select those that are, in your opinion, the most relevant, the most dominant in that objective domain. So to give you some examples on internal efficiency, we showed them last time as well, but we even added more examples. Also for service levels to the business, items that you can measure, compliance to regulation, a set of examples. The same for risk mitigation. Again, only select what's relevant for your organization because your organization is unique. Each organization is unique in this regard. So it might be that there are even not enough examples to cover your situation. Examples on litigation and examples on IP management, and we can even continue on other domains if needed. But if you did that exercise.
Yes, thank you, Hans. So from the tracking of all the objectives, we went to scoring them based on the smartness of it. We went to scoring them based on the pitfalls. So we went from about 15 to 20 objectives to here the 7 objectives that you see here, based on the scoring mechanism, picking out the most relevant ones to this particular organization, of course, which can be different to any other organization. So those 7 ones are the objectives that we set forth for the organization, and then we look into how are we going to measure those objectives, how are we going to monitor them. So reducing the legal spend internally and externally can be measured by the legal spend as a percentage of the revenue of the entire company. This way you also link the activity of the legal department with the entire company. It can be measured by the total cost of services and the evolution of it in time, inside and outside the organization. So the total cost of services inside and towards outside legal counsel, but also software, also advice, etc. Outside expenses versus total legal expense. So these are very concrete measurement approaches for reducing legal spend. Improving department proactivity, that is one that we have been seeing a lot with our customers across the globe, but very hard to measure. Although it's not very hard to measure, you can actually easily measure the proactivity of a department by tracking the number of advice matters that you have in your organization versus the number of litigation matters that you have. Why is that very relevant? Because the more and the better advice that you give to your internal clients, the less litigation they will create and have for the organization. And that you can easily monitor, but also easily defend internally in your organization why you need a certain amount of resources, a certain amount of people to be able to give that advice on a very effective and relevant way to reduce litigation and, of course, reduce costs. So setting the costs of the persons, the people, the resources that you have against the cost of litigation, and it will be very clear to general management, to C-level, why you need people and why it's good to track matters against advice matters against litigation. And that way you really become a proactive department rather than a reactive one with a lot of costs. Reducing the elapsed time on creating contracts. It's a very specific topic within a lot of organizations, but how do you measure that? Well, you can measure it by the number of contracts per department, and you can measure it by the number of contract negotiations that you have in your organization. And that you have toolings, of course, to support you as well. Reducing the elapsed time on legal advice. so all the advice that you give to your internal customers, you can reduce time, of course, always keeping in mind the quality of advice that you will give. And that you can track by the average response times on emails that you send to your internal customers. And if you have enterprise legal management tools that track the activity that you have in the matters, you can actually also track the timing in there. And also, of course, the level of satisfaction of your internal customers can measure the elapsed time, because the satisfaction is often linked to the timing in which internal clients receive an answer to their question, to their advice that they were requesting. Coming to the increase of percentage of pre-just disclosures, this is a very specific objective, but with a lot of positive consequences if you can improve such an objective, and that you can measure by the percentage of matters that you have solved before court procedures. If you track it, if you have toolings to capture that kind of data, it's very easy to track it and to have a dashboarding KPI out of it that you can then communicate in the organization. And of course, the total value of settlements, the involvement of that is also a way of tracking, of measuring that objective. Coming to the reduced number of damages and fines. Of course, the less damages and fines that you have, the less spent that you have. We see that a lot in organizations that are in industries where there is a lot of litigation. If you don't have a lot of litigation, it's less, of course, present, but in most cases it is an objective that turns into a KPI by measuring the total fines versus the total fines and damages actually paid. And if you see the evolution there, you can actually track it, and the total fines damages avoided, which is slightly different. But if you have a way to track the fines and damages avoided, you can actually also show and communicate the productivity and the effectiveness of your legal department. Coming to the last objective, how to measure it, is to reduce the number of citations and fines from regulatory agencies. There are a couple of ways to measure it by tracking the percentage of contracts with privacy-related clauses. Therefore, you need, of course, technology to be able to track such a thing automatically, because manually it is not possible. It takes too much time, too much resources. So technology can actually detect whether there are certain privacy-related clauses, and then you can track it and can support such an objective. The percentage of employees who completed risk compliance trainings, also very important, depending on the industry that you are in. Tracking the awareness and the knowledge of your employees when it comes to compliance issues and risk issues is extremely important to avoid, of course, fines, damages, and litigation. And of course, the number of disciplinary actions that are taken within the organization is also a measurement, a way of tracking the objective of reducing the number of citations and fines from regulatory agencies.
Thank you, Yves. Now, the next step, now that you have your measurements, is to define your target values. Now, you cannot define target values without knowing what your current situation is. So, first is try to identify on the previous elements, what is your current situation? How many contracts are you handling today? Per month, per quarter, per year? Once you know what your current situation is, linked to your overall objectives and the objectives of the organization, you can define achievable targets. Targets for today, but also targets for tomorrow. It might be, for example, on the number of, if we go back to litigation, for example, pre-just disclosures, you will say that in the future that number needs to decrease. So you can say today it's 10, next year it will be 8, 7, 6, and so on. Might be target values for the future. So have a look to where you are today. what's achievable, and how you want to evolve in time on those elements. You did again the exercise briefly. No, you didn't.
Oh, Eve,
No.
Eve.
Well, I didn't do this because it would be not really corresponding to reality. So this is just to show what you have to do in the exercise. You have your legal domains, you have the measurements that you picked out. So this is what we did. We picked out the top 10 measurements. So from the previous exercise, we listed all the possible measurements that you can have to obtain the objectives that we selected. And from all those possible measurements, we picked out the top 10, something that you definitely can do as well. And then you have those ways of measuring, and then you can define your actual score. But to define your actual score, you will see in the next slides and the next exercises how you can do it. You can then set your target score and then start tracking your targets in the next years and define actions. So what exactly would you mean, Hans, within your expertise, with actions that could be taken here in those different measurements and within the legal domains?
Well, if you want to improve your KPIs in a certain domain, it doesn't come from free. You need to do work to achieve that. And work means actions, means sometimes budget, means time of people. So to achieve a certain target, you also need to be aware of the actions linked to that. And quite often, people just define target scores for KPIs, target values, without thinking about the consequences, thinking about the actions that are required in advance to be able to achieve that. So that's why you not only define your target scores, but you also define what's required to achieve that. That's what we mean by actions, budget, and so on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans.
Let's go to the next step.
Now, the next step is you defined your measures, your measurements, but how will you realize them? Sometimes you already have tools, enterprise legal management or specific litigation tools or specific contract management tools. Some of those measurements are probably easy to obtain from those tools, but a number of them will be much harder, where you need to require to register additional data, maybe in the tools, maybe in a separate Excel or in a document. So review your KPIs, your measurements, and reflect on what's your current working environment. Have your tools certain KPIs built in? Are they available? Can they be added? Or do you need some additional registration, or do you need to do some additional manual work? So that's the first step. And the second step is, out of those registrations, manual or automatic, you need to define how you want your KPI report, your output. Is it directly coming from the tools, or is it coming from manual operations? If it's coming from manual operations, be aware of the time you require to fill it in, to complete it, and to extract the data again. It's the same with management dashboards in other domains. Some of them are automatic, and a lot of them also need additional manual work. So that's the first step. How can you achieve those measurements, and how will you present them? And in the next step, how will you visualize them? So once you have your KPIs, Is it a monthly report? Is it a quarterly report? Is it an online dashboard that you're taking a screenshot of? That's one. And the second one is to who you want to communicate what. And basically, you should not end up with more than 10 KPIs at this stage. If you have more, only communicate the 3 most important one to selling the value of your legal team to the management, to the organization. Use next 3 one towards your legal team, a maximum of 3, to obtain better efficiency, better quality, more joy in their work. And the other ones, keep them for yourself. So don't communicate more than 3 to the management, don't communicate more than 3 to your legal team. And the other ones, use them for yourself to improve the operations of the legal team. Do you have a comment on that?
Yes. So this is bringing into practice the exercise that you are doing or will be or should be doing. As Hans mentioned, where will you measure the KPIs? In which environment? Do you do this on paper? Do you do this in an Excel sheet? Do you do this in an enterprise legal management tool such as the Knowliah tool, for example, or other environments where you track those KPIs? Obviously, you will also be able to have input from financial departments when it comes to revenue, when it comes to spend, etc., accounting, also deliver or can deliver input for your KPI tracking, for your measurement of your KPIs. So that's the first one. And then it's to define how and to who do you communicate those KPIs, because tracking, monitoring is one thing, but if you don't do anything, if nobody is aware, if nobody is implicated, it doesn't make any sense. And the way of communicating can be through dashboarding, and simple dashboarding is there very important, to reporting, which is slightly different. And then you have your KPIs that you discuss with management, with C-level, what are there within their objectives, of course, to report to them. But often they do not know which kind of objectives or which kind of KPIs you can monitor from the legal department. So here you have an opportunity to actually define objectives for your department, to define KPIs within your within those objectives, and actually impose, if you want them, to C-level and say, well, listen, this is how we're going to improve productivity, reduce risk, reduce costs, and your C-level management can only be happy to see that there is some measurement, some tracking, some reporting coming from the legal department, which is in a lot of cases not the case or not enough in the eyes of management. But of course, that's management. You also have your team. They need to be involved in those KPI trackings. Why? Because it's their work that is tracked. It's their input, their way of working, their productivity, and their knowledge that is actually part of the objectives. So also communicate it within monthly meetings, within dashboards that are transparent to the entire team. And of course, you will have KPIs that are only for the eyes of the CLO, the chief legal officer, or the legal manager, in terms of confidentiality. And in certain countries, you even have, like Germany, for example, you have very specific restrictions when it comes to KPI monitoring or KPI tracking from privacy perspectives, that you cannot track and monitor everything that you wish to monitor. So that needs to be taken into account as well.
Okay. Then the last 2 steps. So the previous communication was about your results, but you also need some communication actions in introducing KPIs. Yves already touched a number of items in that regard, but starting introducing KPIs in your team will require some communication. Communication about why you want to do it as a CLO, how we will implement it, explain it to the team, put a time frame on it, when, and what the impact, who needs to do what. So what's the impact for your team members? What's the impact for you? What will be the impact for the audience? So the why, how, when, who is a typical element that you need to take along with you when it comes to a certain small, even a small change. A new mechanism introducing KPIs is not different in that regard. And then the second step in your communication is towards your stakeholders within the organization, within the management. Making use really KPIs as an instrument to make clear to the organization what the value is of legal and what the impact is of legal. Also be aware that legal is probably the only team within the organization, maybe next to HR, that has a complete view on the operations of the organization. Because if it's done well, legal is involved in all elements of the operations. When it comes from buying to delivering to complaints to happy customer, in all elements, contracting, legal is involved. Another element in selling the importance of legal that I even applied in the engineering community in Belgium is increase the legal knowledge of your co-workers in the organization. They are eager to learn on legal topics, but give them the opportunity to understand what legal is, how legal is working. Just provide them with basic knowledge in the legal domain. And another element you can do in selling the importance of legal is helping of becoming proactive as a legal team, but you can only achieve that when the business is a little bit understanding what you are doing and is asking for advice, asking for support. So also over there, we have a small exercise, Yves.
Yes. So what is mentioned here is actually a resume of what we discussed in the different steps of this exercise. Is in the communication plan, you communicate to the team, you communicate to management. The communication of the KPI, of the reasoning behind the importance of KPI tracking, monitoring, and the actions around. Your team needs to support that, needs to live that, needs to breathe the KPIs to be able to actually do something to improve them as well. So for the team, it's support of the company objectives. So they need to understand. So it's important that you communicate to your people within the legal department and their stakeholders that the importance of the KPI tracking is there to support the company objective, not only their individual performance or the performance of the team, and of course also the increase of the overall productivity of the team, but also as an individual, making sure that time is freed up to actually do content work rather than administrative work, etc. Or constant reinventing the wheel is not the purpose. Rewriting what already exists is not the purpose, and people will be overall more happy in their jobs. So that's also very important to be aware of. And then towards management, like I just said before, you actually have an opportunity. If you're not tracking KPIs today, you have an opportunity to position your department to do activity reporting, that you actually can show to the company and to management what you're actually doing. We constantly hear from legal departments that they constantly have to defend themselves, that they get a question, what are you actually doing all day? That's horrible to hear, because everybody's overworked and they're constantly working, but a lot of people in the organization do not know what a legal department is actually doing. So by tracking KPIs, it will be very easy to communicate and to report on activity. You will be able to, in a very transparent and readable way, improve your cost reduction, not only for the department but also for the organization when it comes to risk reduction, reduction of fines, etc. And of course, the risk mitigation. You, as a legal counsel, as a legal department, you have a key role in the risk mitigation of your organization. Well, now you will be able to actually demonstrate this and prove it, and also see the evolution and see how you are evaluating and improving in time.
Okay. Then the almost last step is also in your preparation of implementing KPIs. You need to define upfront how you will analyze the results, how you will approach those results, and how you will translate them into improvement actions. So in that regard, it's required to define together with your team probably how you will analyze the results, how you will discuss the results, and how you will define the actions. Now, all of that is again depending on how big is your team. Is your team split into different legal domains or not? Those are all elements impacting your definition of analysis and improvement to achieve better KPIs the next time. Also, Dev, we have an exercise, a small form helping you to complete those elements. We still have 3.5 minutes, Yves.
Yes.
Yes. So Hans just explained, important as a final step is how can you analyze the results, how can you discuss results, and how, of course, can you define actions. Analyzing the results is making sure that you have different points in time where you track and discuss and view the dashboards and the reports to review the activity that has been done on it, and also, of course, see every discrepancy that you have, every evolution that you have. What is the root cause that makes that evolvement or that evolution in the KPIs? Then when you have the results, whether it's a legal department or any other department, monthly meetings, team meetings, whether it's through Teams today or physical, which is more fun, of course, but discuss them. Discuss those KPIs that people understand why they're important and what you can do to actually improve them. Discuss them with the team, but also discuss them with the board, because that's what you're actually supporting. You're supporting the board of your organization, you're supporting the objectives of the entire organization. So not only discuss them with yourself and with your team, but also with the board. And then define actions, depending on urgency, depending on company objectives. But based on those KPIs, you will actually be able to define specific actions that are relevant, because you can do a lot of things that are irrelevant to the organization. Now you will have a tool, a monitoring tool that will enable you to define the right actions in your day-to-day activities.
Okay. So once you have entered all those exercises, and it's not days of work, in an hour you can complete it, then you have all your material to actually start. With the KPIs, you determined which are the most important KPIs for your organization, for your management, for the legal team, and for yourself. And you start communicating your communication plan. You can start your reporting after 1 month or after 3 months, and you can start analyzing and improving each quarter or once a year as it's required for your organization. Oops, that's one too quickly, Yves. Going back. Yves?
Yes. So the most applied KPIs that we see with our customers, but also from international research across the globe, are the ones that are listed here. It can help you in the definition of your KPIs. What we've seen throughout the webinar now is a more in-depth exercise that can be applied to your organization and to your specific environment. Should you, however, decide not to do it and actually go directly towards what is most applied, you can, of course. And that one, the 5 ones that are listed here are the average processing time per matter, the number of active matters per legal professional domain and department, the average time providing answers, number of answers delivered, the average time reviewing a contract, the number of contracts delivered, so that's more from a contract management perspective, and the number of litigations compared to the total number of contracts. These are specific KPIs. Are these the ones most relevant to your organization? Maybe, maybe not, but you have now a tool, an exercise toolkit to define which ones are the KPIs for your organization. Knowliah has an enterprise legal management tool where you can capture data that you are needing to have to be able to monitor, to track KPIs. And of course, Knowliah also has the possibility to dashboard and to report, following up on those KPIs to monitor them. And what is listed here are the actual today possibilities that you have within the Knowliah Enterprise Legal Management Platform, the KPIs that you can track. Of course, we do have a roadmap where a lot of evolution is foreseen in the near and coming future when it comes to KPI monitoring and tracking. As we see this as a key evolution within legal departments, and of course we follow evolutions from our customers and from the market, and translate that also in our tools and in our intelligence that we bring in our software.
Thank you very much, Yves and Hans. If you have any more questions, please do not hesitate to ask them in the chat box below. We're running out of time, but our experts will hang on a couple of more minutes to answer your questions if you still have some. So what's next for you? You just filled in the working file. You can contact Hans if you want to reflect on your KPI plans, or you can have a discussion with Yves about how Knowliah can help you in defining and achieving the KPIs for your legal department. So please do not hesitate to ask your last questions in the chat box. The experts will be very happy to answer them as well. And we want you to give a little score on this webinar. I will start a poll in a couple of seconds. Please let us know how useful it was for you. 1 means not useful at all, and 5 means that it was very useful. I'll start the poll right now. So please leave your feedback behind, and if you have any more questions, please do ask them in the chat box. I've noticed that Alison already said that it was an excellent and helpful presentation. Thank you very much for attending as well, Alison. And I see the results coming in for the evaluation of the webinar. I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. And I'll end it right now. Okay, and it's a good score for our experts. I've just shared the results. We only received a 4 or a 5, so thank you very much, Hans and Yves. That means that the webinar was very useful for all the attendees.
Thank you as well. Glad to help, and of course, do not hesitate to reach out for any further discussion, further explanation, demonstration. We're here to further assist you.
Indeed. So thank you very much. There are no questions left in the chat box. So I'll take some seconds to also invite you all for our next webinar. It will be about today's top 5 best practices for contract lifecycle management. Also a very trending topic in legal departments these days. So Hans and Yves will be there as well to give you more insights and knowledge. Please do not forget to register on the ECLA website, or just go to the Knowliah website as well. Thank you very much, and please do not hesitate also to stay in touch with us. Martin, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Sien. Thank you, Hans and Yves, for another captivating session. I think the poll results speak for themselves. And then from my side, there isn't that much to actually add, other than, as Sien mentioned, the next webinar will be in 2 weeks. So 2 Thursdays from now on the 6th. May at 11. So we do hope that everybody will join us there as well. Until then, I wish you a pleasant afternoon. Thank you and bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.